The day I admitted I wanted you was the hardest day of my career, and I've had days that should have ended me. I am a man built from discipline. Every decision in my life has been run through a process: calculate, assess, control. I don't feel things, I manage them. I've spent years perfecting that system. And it worked. God, it worked. Until you. I remember the exact moment it broke. It wasn't romantic. I was in a meeting, 15 people in the room, all of them watching me, and someone said something ordinary. Something that meant nothing. But it reminded me of something you'd said 3 weeks earlier, and I had to stop. Mid-sentence. Because something inside me was pulling toward you the way a compass finds north. It terrified me. I didn't choose you that day. I fought you. I told myself it was distraction. I called it weakness. I built cases against it in my head the way I build cases against bad investments. Cold, logical, clinical. But here's what I couldn't calculate: what it actually costs you when you choose not to feel. You don't become stronger. You become quieter. And quiet isn't peace. Quiet is just pain with better posture. So, I chose you, not because I was certain, not because I had a guarantee. I chose you, because the only thing that scared me more than loving you was imagining what I'd become if I kept fighting it. But choosing isn't the end of the story, is it? There's a version of me that most people know, the one who walks into rooms with certainty, the one who doesn't hesitate, who studied every angle, calculated every outcome before the conversation even begins. The man who built everything you see from a single, disciplined belief: emotions are variables you control, not forces you surrender to. It took me years to build that version of myself. And I was proud of it. Not arrogantly, not in the way people perform confidence because they're afraid, but in the way a craftsman stands back and looks at something he's made with his own hands. Something solid. Something that doesn't break under pressure. I had a system. When something felt threatening, an attachment forming, a soft spot being found, I named it, categorized it, and filed it away. Not suppressed. Managed. There's a difference, or so I believed. Suppression is violence against yourself. Management is intelligence. Control. I was very good at control. My mornings were structured before the sun came up. My decisions ran through the same 3-step filter regardless of whether it was a business call or a difficult conversation. I didn't let things linger. I processed them, moved on, kept building. The people around me respected this. Some of them envied it. A few of them were afraid of it. And that was fine. That was by design. Here's what nobody tells you about building that kind of wall. The kind that looks like discipline and strength from the outside. You don't notice how much light it keeps out until something bright tries to get in. You don't notice what you've been protecting yourself from. Because protection feels exactly like peace when you've never known the difference. I remember the week before everything shifted. Nothing dramatic happened. No warning signs I could have logged in any journal. I was running at my usual pace, meetings back to back, decisions with weight behind them, nights that ended later than they should have. I was fine. I was operating exactly as designed. But something was. Restless. Not anxious. Restless is different. Anxiety is when you don't know what's wrong. Restlessness is when something inside you knows exactly what's missing and you're just not ready to admit it. I sat in my office one evening after everyone had gone, just me and whatever silence sounds like when an empty building holds it. And I noticed, for the first time in a long time, that I hadn't felt anything real in weeks. Not numb. I wasn't numb. I was functioning. But functioning and feeling aren't the same thing, and somewhere between ambition and achievement I had traded one for the other without even signing the papers. Have you ever been so good at something that it started costing you things you couldn't yet name? That's where I was. I didn't know then that you were what was missing. I didn't even know I was missing anything. I thought this was just what discipline felt like at the higher levels. Leaner, cleaner, quieter. I thought silence was a sign of mastery. It was the most expensive misunderstanding of my life. Because here's the thing about a system that manages everything. It doesn't tell you when it starts managing the wrong things. It just keeps running. Keeps optimizing. Keeps filing away anything that doesn't fit the model. And feelings, real ones, inconvenient ones, they don't fit neatly into any model. They don't respond to logic. They don't respect your calendar. They don't care that you've built something extraordinary with your life and that complicating it would be inefficient. They just arrive. And the system I'd spent years building had one flaw I hadn't accounted for. It could manage everything except the moment something real finally broke through. That moment was coming. I didn't know it yet. I was still sitting in that office, running through tomorrow's agenda, convincing myself that restlessness was just fatigue. But the fracture had already started. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a hairline crack in something I believed was unbreakable. The kind of crack that doesn't announce itself. It just quietly grows in the dark, until the morning you reach for the wall and realize it isn't there anymore. I've been in thousands of meetings. I know how to read a room in 30 seconds. I know what body language says before words do. I know when someone's lying, when someone's overconfident, when the energy in the room has shifted and why. It's not talent, it's pattern recognition, built over years of paying attention when other people were busy performing. I am never distracted in a meeting. Not because I'm more focused than other people, but because distraction for me was always something I could see coming and redirect. A noise, a discomfort, a thought that didn't serve the moment. I'd feel the pull and I'd release it, the way you exhale a breath you didn't know you were holding. But that day was different. We were deep into a presentation, something operational, something I'd normally have been 20 steps ahead of in my mind. The kind of meeting where you're half listening because you already know where it's going and you're already building the response. Someone used a phrase. I don't even remember exactly what it was. Something ordinary, something I'd probably heard hundreds of times in different variations. But the way they said it, the cadence, the rhythm of it, reminded me of something you'd said 3 weeks before. On a Tuesday. In a conversation that meant nothing on the surface, and apparently meant everything underneath. And I stopped. Not physically. I didn't lose the thread of the room. But somewhere beneath the composed exterior I maintain in those spaces, something shifted. Like a compass needle moving when it senses a field it can't resist. Quiet. Instantaneous. Undeniable. I felt a lot of things in boardrooms. Pressure. Clarity. The specific electricity of a deal about to close. But I had never, not once, felt someone's absence in a room they weren't in. Until that moment, I didn't know that was even possible. And that's when something uncomfortable arrived. The recognition that this wasn't something I had managed. This wasn't a feeling I had named, categorized and filed. This was something that had been operating quietly beneath my awareness for weeks, and it had just announced itself in the worst possible place. In front of 15 people who expected me to be impenetrable. I am impenetrable. I have the evidence. I've navigated situations that would have destroyed men with more obvious cracks than mine. I've made hard calls in moments when emotion would have ruined everything. I've built something real from nothing, and discipline was the foundation of every floor. But discipline only works on things you know you're fighting. And this, whatever this was, whatever you had become in the architecture of my inner life, I hadn't fought it, because I hadn't seen it. It had moved in quietly, the way winter light changes in the afternoon, gradual, then total, by the time you notice it's dark. So there I was, 15 people, a presentation about operations, and something that felt like gravity, pulling me toward a person who wasn't in the room. Here's what I didn't do. I didn't pretend it wasn't happening. I know that sounds like a small thing, but for a man like me, acknowledging something I can't immediately control is not small. It goes against every instinct I've cultivated, every pattern I've rewarded myself for. But I sat with it. For 4 seconds, maybe 5. Felt the weight of it without trying to immediately file it away. And here's what I noticed in those 4 seconds. It didn't feel like weakness. It felt like orientation. Like I had been moving in a direction I'd chosen deliberately, rationally, for years, and something inside me had just quietly pointed and said, this way. Not louder. Not more logical. Just truer. And that terrified me more than any business risk I've ever assessed, because business risks, I can model those. I can build a case, for or against. I can hold them at arm's length and evaluate them from a safe distance. You can't model a compass. It doesn't negotiate with your logic. It just points. And it was pointing at you. I finished the meeting. Performed flawlessly. Because that's what I do. But something had changed that couldn't be unchanged. And when I walked out of that room, I knew, for the first time, that fighting it wasn't going to be as clean as I'd assumed. The question I couldn't answer yet, did I even want to fight it anymore? I want to be honest about what I did next. Because it wasn't noble. After that meeting, after I felt that pull I couldn't explain or dismiss, I went to war. Not outwardly. Not in any way anyone would have seen. Outwardly, I was exactly as I always am, deliberate, composed, operating at full capacity. But internally? Internally, I built an entire case against you. I listed the reasons. I actually listed them. Not metaphorically, I sat down with a clarity I usually reserve for high-stakes decisions, and I itemized everything that made this a bad idea. The timing. The exposure. The way attachment complicates clear thinking. The inefficiency of emotion in a life that has been designed around discipline. I built the case the way I build every case, thoroughly. I brought in the evidence, past moments where I had allowed something to soften and regretted it. Times when feeling too much had cost me time, clarity, direction. I held them up like exhibits. See? This is what happens when you let the walls down. This is the price. And then I argued against myself. For 3 weeks, I argued. Every time a thought of you surfaced, I'd examine it, challenge it, dismantle it. Not angrily. That would have been a waste of energy. Clinically, the way a surgeon removes something that doesn't belong, carefully, without ceremony. I'm good at this. I've had practice. You don't build what I've built by being ruled by desire. You build it by understanding what you want, and then being brutally honest about whether what you want is actually good for you. Those are two different questions, and most people never separate them. Most people just want what they want and call it destiny. I don't do that. I never have. So I asked both questions. Do I want this? Yes, clearly. The pull was too consistent to be noise. Is it good for me? That's where the argument lived. That's where I spent 3 weeks. And here's the part that exposed me. The arguments I built against you were technically sound. They were logical. They were the kinds of arguments that, if someone else had brought them to me about a decision in their life, I would have said, this is clear thinking. This is self-awareness. This is discipline working. But something was wrong. When I run a case against a bad investment, the conclusion feels clean. It feels like resolution. I close the case, and I don't think about it again. Because the logic has done what logic is supposed to do. It's settled the question. With you, the arguments kept rebuilding. I'd dismantle the feeling, and within a day, it would return, not louder, not more irrational, just quieter and more certain. As if the feeling wasn't trying to override my logic. As if it was just waiting. Patient. Unmoved. And that told me something my logic couldn't. Real things don't respond to arguments. Not because they're irrational, but because they exist in a place arguments can't reach. The body knows before the mind does. The gut knows before the strategy does. And when something is genuinely real, genuinely true, no amount of case building actually resolves it. It just teaches you how much energy you're willing to waste. I was wasting enormous energy. 3 weeks of internal warfare, and the only thing I'd proven was that you weren't going away. Not because you had done anything. Not because you'd pushed, or asked, or made a claim on any part of my life. You hadn't. The feeling was fighting entirely on its own. Which, looking back, should have been the clearest signal of all. Have you ever fought yourself so hard you were exhausted by your own logic? That's where I was. Winning every argument. Losing the war. And slowly, a realization began to form that I didn't want to face. Not because it was painful, but because of what it meant. What I would have to do with it. The realization, I wasn't afraid of you. I was afraid of what choosing you would require of me. What it would mean to be a man who chose something he couldn't control. Who let something real into a life designed around control. I had built a life around knowing what I was doing. You were something I couldn't know in advance. And the war wasn't about you at all. The war was about whether I was willing, after everything I'd built, everything I'd survived, to be uncertain again. Let me tell you what I didn't expect. I didn't expect the quiet to be so loud. When you spend years building a life around control, around managing what you feel and when you feel it, you develop a relationship with silence that feels safe. Silence becomes your ally. It means nothing is out of order. Nothing is demanding your attention that shouldn't be. Everything is held in its place. I mistook that silence for peace for a very long time. I want to tell you what it actually was. It was 11 p.m. on a Wednesday. The kind of night that doesn't announce itself, no dramatic weather, no meaningful date. Just the ordinary dark that comes after an ordinary day. I was in bed, which is where I was supposed to be. I'd processed everything that needed processing. I'd made my decisions. I'd earned the silence. And the silence was deafening. Not because it was empty. Because I could feel, with a precision I hadn't noticed before, exactly what it was full of. Not thoughts. Thoughts I can manage. But something older than thoughts. Something underneath the thinking, underneath the decision-making, underneath the carefully maintained surface of a man who has everything under control. Longing. Not dramatic longing. Not the kind you see performed in movies. The quiet kind. The kind that sits in your chest like a stone that's been there so long you stopped feeling its weight. Until suddenly you lie still enough and you realize, this has been here the whole time. I'd been calling it contentment. It was suppression. And there's a difference I hadn't let myself see. because seeing it would have required me to admit something I wasn't ready to admit, that the life I had built, for all its achievements, for all its discipline and precision and exterior success, had a room in it that I'd sealed off, a room where things I didn't know how to carry had been quietly accumulating for years. That night, lying in the silence I'd always called peace, I took an honest inventory. Not of accomplishments, not of strategy, of cost. What had it cost me? The management, the control, the careful architecture of a man who doesn't let things reach him. What had all that discipline quietly taken from me, invoice by invoice, in denominations too small to notice until they weren't? Here's what I found. I'd gotten very good at not needing things. At convincing myself that need was weakness and independence was strength. That asking for nothing from the world, emotionally, relationally, was a sign of evolution. But need doesn't disappear when you stop acknowledging it. It just learns to hide. It finds quieter rooms. It borrows the language of strength and presents itself as control. And then, in the dark, when everything else is still, it just sits there, patient, unnamed, waiting. I realized that night that quiet isn't peace. Quiet is just pain with better posture. It stands up straight. It goes to work. It performs at the highest level. It never gives anyone a reason to ask if you're okay, because the performance is perfect. The system is running. But underneath the performance, something is waiting to be seen. Not fixed, seen. That's all it wants. Not resolution. Just acknowledgement. Just someone who looks directly at it, instead of routing carefully around it. And I had spent years routing around it. I had spent years treating the deepest parts of myself like inconvenient guests, politely kept in another room, never introduced, never allowed to sit at the table. You can only do that for so long before something starts to cost something. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the small, irreversible ways that quiet lives erode the people who were supposed to fill them. Here's what I sat with that night, and it wasn't comfortable. The man you see, the composed one, the certain one, the one who seems to need nothing, is real. He's not a performance, he's everything I've actually built. But there's another version of me underneath him that I'd been starving. And something about you, something specific, something I still haven't been able to fully articulate, had reached that version. The one I thought I'd buried well enough that no one would find it. Including me. That night, for the first time in longer than I want to admit, I let myself feel it. Not all of it, just enough. And what surprised me wasn't how much it hurt. It was how much it felt like relief. I have never made a decision without a plan. Even the ones that looked spontaneous had infrastructure underneath. I don't trust luck. I don't trust hope. I trust frameworks, analyzed situations, stress-tested assumptions, conclusions built from evidence so solid that even if everything went wrong, I understood exactly why. That's how I've lived. And it's worked. What I'm about to tell you goes against every principle I've built my life around. I chose you without a framework. Not recklessly. I want to be clear about that. I'm not someone who confuses recklessness with courage. They're not the same thing. Recklessness ignores risk. Courage acknowledges it and moves anyway. I saw the risk. I saw all of it. I knew exactly what I was opening myself up to. The exposure, the vulnerability, the specific kind of damage that only something real can cause. Controlled distance is safe. But closeness, genuine closeness, is where people get actually broken. I'd been protecting myself from that for a very long time. And yet, there was a night, after the meeting, after the 3 weeks of internal warfare, after the honest inventory taken alone, in a silence that finally told me the truth, when something in me went quiet. Not the familiar quiet, a different kind. The kind that comes after a decision is already made somewhere beneath your awareness, and all your thinking mind has to do is catch up. I lay there in that quiet and asked myself one question. Not what's the risk? Not can I afford this? Not what's the worst-case scenario? All questions I'd already run until they were threadbare. I asked, what do I become if I keep saying no? And the answer arrived before I'd finished asking. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't come with music or revelation. It came the way truth usually comes, quietly, directly, without ceremony. The honest answer to a question you finally asked correctly. I saw the version of myself that kept the walls, that kept managing instead of feeling. That kept building an extraordinary exterior life while something internal slowly fell silent, not in protest, just in resignation. I saw what I'd already been becoming, incrementally, in denominations too small to notice. And that version of me scared me more than you did. Here's something I've never said to anyone. I am not afraid of failure. I've failed before, in ways that would have finished other men, and I've rebuilt every time. That's not courage, that's just what I know how to do. But there's a specific kind of failure that's different from the ones I know how to rebuild from. It's the failure of a life that functioned perfectly but never actually reached anything. A life so controlled it never broke, but never opened either. That failure doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. And I'd been accumulating it for years, without calling it by its name. So I chose you. Not with certainty. Not with a plan. Not after modeling every scenario and confirming the expected value was positive. I chose you because the only thing I knew with certainty, the only thing my entire system of logic had finally, after 3 weeks, clearly concluded, was this. The cost of not choosing you was a version of me I didn't want to become. That's not a romantic reason. I want to be honest about that. It wasn't candlelight or poetry. It was assessment. The most important assessment of my life. Run with everything I have, and the result was you. What does it mean to choose someone before you have any guarantee? It means you trust something you can't fully see. It means you act on something real before you have evidence it will go the way you need it to go. It means you accept that the most important things in a life, the ones that actually change you, never come with a guarantee attached. I've spent my life building certainty, engineering it, refusing to proceed without it. And here, with you, for the first time, I proceeded. Not because I stopped being afraid, but because I finally understood what I was actually afraid of. And the thing I was afraid of wasn't you. It was a life where I'd been careful enough to avoid every real thing. I'm still not sure this story ends the way I want it to. I don't know the future of this. No one does. But I know this. The man who made this choice is more honest than the one who fought it. And for now, that's enough.